Colonization is by far one of the darkest chapters of human history, and if you ask someone whether colonization is still a thing or not, chances are that most people will say no. But I'm here to prove it otherwise. Let me show you the vicious cycle of poverty and how modern day colonization affects every single one of us. So, colonization, as you all know today, started with the Portuguese in the late 15th century. The age of colonization started roughly at the same time as the age of discovery, the only difference being that the age of colonization outlasted the age of discovery all the way up to the late 20th century. In this almost 500 years of colonial era, a select few European nations and Japan ruled over the entire world except for a few countries, namely Thailand, Persia, and Ethiopia. And in these 500 years, they looted, plundered, and exploited countries, committed ethnic cleansings, mass genocides, and took people as slaves. Africans, Native Americans, and Asians were not the only victims of colonization. Eastern Europe was kind of in the same state, in the sense that they acted like pseudo colonies of Russia, Austria Hungary, and the Ottomans. In the age of colonization, there were black slaves as well as white and Asian slaves. All this came down crashing with the Second World War. After the war had ended, colonies were gaining independence left and right, and with the blink of an eye, the age of colonization had ended. On December 20, 1999, colonization officially ended with the Portuguese handover of Macau to China. It all started with the Portuguese and it all ended with the Portuguese. Now, you guys might be asking, if there are no more colonies, then how can colonization still be a thing? And you would be correct to some extent, but here's the thing, colonization was never really about conquering land and enforcing your lifestyle on others. It was all about money, wealth, and supremacy. Territorial colonization might have ended in 1999, but intellectual and financial colonization never ended. Let's take a hypothetical scenario as an example. There is an Indian man who went to study in UK. Now he needs money for tuition fees, housing, food, and other costs of living. So where is he getting his money from? He's getting his money from India. Indian money is flowing into the British economy in form of tuition fees, rent, and other costs of living. And after his education has ended, he has two options in front of him: return to India or apply for residence in UK and enter the British workforce. That Indian man is highly likely to choose the latter option, as UK has far better opportunities than India. As an engineer, he can make around 60,000 US dollars in India, but as an engineer in UK, he can make at least 5 to 10 times more. UK also has less pollution, lower corruption, and in general a better quality of life compared to India. So it's only wise that the man choose the latter option. So in the type of scenario where the man decides to return to India, it is a win-win situation for both countries. UK got its money and India got educated youth. But in the type of scenario where he does decide to remain in UK, it will only be a win-win situation for UK, because he will be working, adding value, and paying income tax to a country that didn't spend any resources on his life and education. UK as the host country knows all too well about the skills and talents of its foreign students, so they won't hesitate to give the talented people the residence visa that they need. India, on the other hand, will be losing everything. They will lose their precious resources and a talented youth. I'm pretty sure you guys know this phenomenon as brain drain, a phenomenon where the rich and developed countries hog away the great minds and labor from developing and underdeveloped countries. And this phenomenon is the reason why rich and developed countries remain rich and developed while developing nations remain as developing. India might not be a territorial or political colony of UK anymore, but it's still a financial and intellectual colony of UK. And not just UK, but also of Canada, US, Australia, and a lot of other countries. India is not the only country that is facing this problem. Almost all the developing and underdeveloped nations are facing this problem. And to some extent, developed countries like Greece are also facing this problem. Just today in our school, our vice principal gave us a speech. She talked about how we won't be able to get the opportunity to study abroad if we are not good students with good discipline. This made me wonder how much mentally colonized we, the people of the non-developed countries, actually are, because in a country, people shouldn't have the mindset that they are producing labor for another countries. They shouldn't have that type of mindset. Yet we do have that kind of mindset. In the last 20 or so years, there hasn't been a single country to reach the developed status. It's not because countries don't want to be developed, but because they can't become developed. Developed countries have a lot of opportunities, mainly because of their low birth rate. In a developed country, the cost of raising a child is really high compared to a non-developed countries. So people tend to have fewer and fewer children. And this is a problem, a very big one at that, because a country that is built upon the shoulders of 20 million people can't be run by 15 million people. So there is always more jobs than people in the developed nations, and someone needs to fill these vacant positions. Great minds from underdeveloped and developing countries are the ones to do so. Poor countries like Nigeria can have a higher fertility rate because the cost of living is really low there, and the more children equals to higher income for the family. The children become the human capital for the family. Poor families send their children to developed countries for low skilled labor in hopes of getting better pay than their home country. Like in my country, 1 out of 10 families have a family member who lives and works abroad. My own uncle and aunt live in Canada and work as doctors there. People move to developed countries for better opportunities and a better quality of life, but this ends up making their country of origin pretty much in a sorry state, because the value they could have added to their own countries is being added to an already developed country. USA, for example, has a fertility rate lower than the replacement rate, yet their population is increasing every year. The main cause of this increase is immigration. USA is the number one destination for people from poor nations who seek a better quality of life. This right here is a map of all the colonial, pseudo-colonial and non-colonial countries that used to be empires. And this right here are all the developed countries. As you can see, other than a few exceptions, the colonial nations and a select few former colonies are the so-called developed nations. The brain drain phenomenon caused by these countries are slowing down the progress of the non-developed countries. This is what you would call intellectual and financial colonization. Colonization hasn't ended. Only the form in which colonization is exercised has changed. And you can't really blame the people here. People by nature seek pleasure and a better quality of life. They will always opt for places with a higher standard of living. So non-developed countries need to find a way to break free of this modern form of colonization and the vicious cycle of poverty. The only way to do that is if the government can manage to gain the trust of the people that their own country is good. At least by trying to improve the quality of life, the government can reverse the brain drain effect to some extent. But at the end of the day, things are easier said than done.